record, they have to finish. And then when they do finish the program, it's gone. So the record is never really harmed, except for the initial arrest. That's not going to go away, obviously, but there's no filing. It's basically simply just a detention by police. That's all that'll be on their record.
And is that like driving without a license, or is it stuff more, what you would call more serious than that?
It's pretty much anything that's an arrestable offense that's lower than some of the higher end crimes. You know, and basically, if we're not going to put them in a program if they're doing robberies or that kind of thing. Serious felonies isn't going to happen, but anything lower than a serious felony, the program should be available to them.
Great, that's good. We need all the resources we can get, so thank you.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Jocelyn Francis, Assistant City Manager. For the month of January, our code enforcement officers issued 203 citations. They completed 15 red tags, responded to 20 animal control calls for service, and responded to 6 building code violations. Just a reminder that vehicle registration season is upon us. Today we were closed to the public, but tomorrow business as usual. The DMV will be here April 8th through the 11th, so wanted to start getting that word out there this evening. And as mentioned at the last council meeting, the hazardous waste drop-off event has been rescheduled for Saturday, February 17th from 8 a.m. to noon, and it will be located here on the City Hall campus.
Great. Any questions? Thank you.
When do the signups for DMV go available?
That is a great,
Generally the week before.
Generally the week before?
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
great.
All right.
Good afternoon, City Council. Just wanted to start by thanking the council and the city manager for allowing myself and 2 members of the finance team to attend the CSMFO conference. That's the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers. This is the first time I brought team members with me to the conference, and I think it was a really good experience for them to get more exposure to the different topics that are out there. They attended sessions on adequate reserves, budgeting best practices, and that allowed me to attend the sessions on the anticipated changes to accounting standards and fun topics like that. It was also nice getting to network in person. I got to speak with Chris Wojcik, who was a former finance director for the city of Avalon, and so it was great networking and getting a chance to talk to him. Other than that, we're still wrapping up the audit. The nice thing about the conference is able to work with our audit partner on a couple of the last items, tying that up, so I should have that to present at the next council meeting. Other than that, tonight I will be presenting on the mid-year budget, where we'll be going over kind of revenues year to date, as well as some requested amendments. Unless there's any questions.
No. Thank you.
Yep.
City manager report?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We're missing a couple people tonight, as you can see. Jackie Cordero and Dave Hart are missing. Absent just for the meeting. So,
Oh God, I hope they're not missing.
just absent, whether it's due to weather or whether it's due to illness. So just a couple other things I would want to indicate to the public and the council know. We've had a number of establishing a promotional list in the fire department for firefighter, captain, and engineer. And then these lists will be available to the fire chief over the next year to work off of any vacancies come open. We continue to have a job posting still out there and open for part-time harbor. If anybody is interested, please go to the city website and fill that out. I want to acknowledge that I received last week from Catalina Island Yacht Club their donations that they did for calendar 2023. Their lease provides that they have through $32,500 worth of charitable donations. They provided $76,900 worth of donations. They're always over, but just hit some of those highlights. They had a total of 4 scholarships between the auxiliary and the foundation for the Avalon High School. $7,000 to Catalina Kids Ventures, it's $12,000 to Catalina Island Search and Rescue, $4,000 to Catalina Island Humane Society, and then $2,500 to the fire department, amongst others.
Yeah.
So I just want to recognize that they've gone above and beyond, and we certainly appreciate how they meet and determine where their money's going, and thank them. And then finally, I just want to acknowledge both the harbor and fire departments for taking such an active and professional role in recognizing Ron Aaron at his service, the family service last week. I think the presence of the harbor and the fire department, both with their vehicles out front and in the service, meant a lot to the family. It was impressive to see them involved like that. And I do want to thank Jeff Rusak and the Island Company for making the casino available really at the last minute. It came, it was supposed to be out at Descanso, but with the weather looking like it did, it turned out to be a beautiful day, but it was very nice to have it in there. So just want to thank them for being able to move so quickly to make that available. And that is it. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a city attorney?
Yeah, I'm here. Just no report. Just note that I will be in the city 2 weeks from now, and I will be having office hours. So if you want to stop by, I'll be in City Hall in a designated room somewhere.
It's not in my new office, I can tell you that.
It'll be the closet coming to you, right?
Exactly. All right, Scott, thanks for being there. Wait, a little clarification since we were just talking about this. Okay, tell us again, if we're gonna miss a meeting, what do we do?
So, okay. So if you're going to miss a meeting and you need to attend remotely,
Yes?
that you let us know 72 hours prior to that time, and we can have you attend remotely from whatever location you are, as long as at that location we post the notice so that the public can also attend at that location.
Okay,
There is still the exception in the Brown Act for if you have a medical emergency or child care issues, that you can attend remotely even after the agenda is posted. But in order for that to happen, we have to have the city council hear the reasons why you cannot be present after the agenda is posted and make a motion to excuse your attendance and be present at that other location, and then you can participate at that other location without the posting of the agenda at that remote location.
okay, so a question. So if this emergency comes up pretty quickly, how do we vote on it as a council? Because we're not really in a council meeting, we're still.
So what the Brown Act, the new provision in the Brown Act requires is that if you have an emergency, you let the city manager know, and then when the meeting starts, the first item on the agenda is a special request to add an agenda item to allow the city council to vote on the excused absence and attendance at a remote location. And then if that motion passes by 4/5 vote, then you vote on whether circumstances exist that allow you to attend remotely. And you have to generally describe what those circumstances are.
Okay,
And then the council has to allow that to happen.
okay, got it? Okay, thank you. Council member reports.
I don't have anything. I attended a meeting with a representative from Representative Garcia's office and members of the USDA who are in charge of the Community Connect and Reconnect grant options, along with one of the members of the connectivity group that was interested in reapplying for an additional round, and went through what those options look like. And currently, it looks like the only way to move forward with that, with getting a higher level of points in the competitive world, is to have the city actually be the one running that. So, talked about it briefly already with the city manager, but I'm not sure that we have city staff hours available at this time to be able to move forward with that. So we're back to the drawing board. But if anybody just wants to give me $30 million, I will take it and give you all the kind words for the rest of your life that I can. Also attended Ron Aaron's service and was going to bring up the fact, thank you Dave for mentioning it, the support from the first responders, from fire, from LA County Fire, from Harbor Department especially, and from LA County Sheriff. Thank you all for being there in attendance. It really did mean a lot to their family. I had a chance to talk with Emily about it, and was overwhelming to see the whole crew up there, and was very meaningful. So thank you guys for doing that. And then have Gateway Cities tomorrow in the beautiful city of Paramount. So if anyone wants to have a fun boat ride with me tomorrow morning, I'll be on it.
Well, I'll be on the boat, but I'm going to play golf, so.
Oh, that's way more fun.
Okay, over this way.
I'll go ahead. I met with, on January 31st, we met with a couple of us and a couple of the community members as well. Met with Supervisor Janice Hahn and her staff. Dave was there, Jocelyn was there. I think we had great conversations. Mary, thank you for being there too.
Yeah.
It's always just exciting to have them here in town, so they can just see our faces, and whenever there's something else that comes up, because there's always something else, they know who they're speaking to and they know the community that they're helping. So I really always appreciate when they make it over. And also did attend the Conservancy Town Hall through Zoom that same night. I was able to work with Josh Lewandow's office on a couple other things besides everything else that we are working on. A couple new things. I was able to assist 9 people with a couple of different issues that they had with the DMV visit. So I'm in the process of helping them with that. The DMV office was very helpful, just had to make a list of the issues and any extra details they needed to move forward with that. So that's exciting, gonna get that done so people don't have to go over and, you know, have to worry about the financial hardship of it all. And then another thing that we're working on also with DMV is it's AB 60, and that's for a California driver's license, as well as AB 1766, and that's just for a California ID, and that would be for our residents that, regardless of their immigration status, can apply. I just wanted to make sure that I go through these first, because I know both programs have different requirements, and that they apply correctly to our residents, and that our residents' information is protected still, so they feel comfortable, because I know both of these are very important. Especially I know now with the change of system and the Express, they're making sure to ask for ID, and not a lot of our residents do have the ID, so
Yeah,
you
that's
know, they're
very,
kind of limbo with that. So that's one of the couple projects that I'm working on now.
that's great.
Speaking of the Express, I know it's been a challenge in making the change from the books to the digital, but I want to commend them. In previous years, if a boat was canceled, you wouldn't find out that that boat was canceled until you actually got there. To be able to make arrangements early enough that I didn't have to worry about getting stuck on the mainland on Sunday was really nice. But was on the 2 o'clock, was notified at 11 o'clock that they'd canceled the boats. But yeah, it was good. I had some concerns about it, and it's just working its little kinks out. And but I want to commend both the Express staff here on the island and the staff in Long Beach. They were great.
So now, are you saying, so you had a reservation you were booked to go on the 2 o'clock, and you received a text or an email or something saying that it was canceled?
That was canceled.
Oh,
Which before you'd have your tickets, you'd show up and you found out the boat was canceled.
or you called.
Or you called, yeah.
Yeah.
But this way, I knew at 11 o'clock, I got a text at 10:58 that they had canceled the boat.
Nice.
Contact them to make, they gave, and the office would be open until 4 o'clock. But it was just easier, I was going there anyways and got everything changed over.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, no, it was, granted they wanted to charge me for changing the ticket, but I said, wait a minute, you canceled the boat. And they went, oh, that's right. But, and I guess somewhere along the line, they're gonna fix that problem too, so.
Cool.
But no, it's a new thing. And thank you, Val, for showing me how to make a reservation online. But no, if we're patient, it should work. So.
Okay, and I have nothing to report. So let's go to oral communications. This is an opportunity for people to speak on items that are not on the agenda. You will be limited to 2 minutes and no action will be taken.
I'm not used to getting to go before Paul. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jim Lujahan from Love Catalina Island. Just a couple of quick updates on behalf of the Visitors Bureau. We still need 2024 confirmed community events. We have a lot of things that are sort of gray or pencil on our calendar, and we're in the season now where people are starting to plan their spring travel. So if you work with an organization, or if anyone at home works with an organization that does an event sometime in 2024, please send the details to michelle@lovecatalina.com. Speaking of events, we have confirmed the date for one of our own annual events, which is Pride. Pride this year will be held on June 15th, and again, we'll use Wrigley Stage as sort of the center point for all of those activities. And out of keeping with our norm, the February board meeting is not on the third Thursday, so anyone who has that saved on their calendar, please don't show up then. It will be a 2-day event this February on the 28th and 29th, and be a closed session as a board retreat. Lisa, you mentioned the connectivity group. I have been working with Lance and some others on possible submission of op-eds, and have drafts of that out for people to review, quotes that we put in there to help raise awareness about our critical need for that funding. And you may have caught wind that we have an unusual number of inaugural ship visits this year. We've already had one in early January, but we have 4 more on the books. And that's sort of part of a whole global repositioning of ships and reallocation of ships, but we get the benefit of having 4 inaugural calls still to come this year. So I'll be working with the cruise lines to coordinate, as I have in the past, those ceremonies, if any, that we do on those days. And that's all.
I have a question. After we went to that workshop that you held, whenever that was, with the trailhead, and there was that AI presentation, are you still going to look into that direction with the AI?
So the actual AI presenter was just sort of educational to us all about how to use AI, and I have experimented here and there. I let AI write a whole script for me the other day on some social media posts I wanted to do, but by the time I edited it to make it what I wanted to say, it wasn't that efficient for me, but it was fun to see what it came up with. The other presentation was from Placer, which was the demographic profiling based on cell phones in the community.
Yes.
And we have initiated that contract. It began in January, and we are going through the process of verifying all the location pins, and we're oddly urban for our ruralness. So we have many locations. Think of like the brew house and Maggie's on the ground floor, Steve's on the second floor, and hotel on the third floor. Well, the default would be to read that as one business location. So we're working with Placer to go in and strata those different things so that we'll get reads. When we do a report on restaurants, we'll just get the restaurant activity and so on. And I've requested from the city to provide us information on the physical location of short-term rentals, not the owner information, not all the private information, but the actual physical location, so that we can run subset reports for lodging that are specific to short-term rental visitor patterns versus hotel visitor patterns. So we're going through all that. We have about 180 pins that we're verifying and updating on there. For whatever reason, they don't interface with Google Maps. They interface with another map platform. And we're finding it was very out of date once we're actually in there. It still showed the 2 Vaughn stores. It still showed hotels that have changed names and been remodeled and so on. So but we're doing it.
Oh, great, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go to the consent calendar, please.
Okay, first item is seeking approval of the minutes from the January 16th, 2024 regular city council meeting. Warrants, approval of total expenditures for January 1, 2024 through January 19th, 2024, totaling $1,748,677.21. Item 3, adopt a resolution accepting the fiscal year 23-24 first quarter treasurer's report. And item 4, authorize the city manager or his designee to circulate a request for proposals for qualified vendors to operate a snack bar concession at Joe Machado Field.
I'm wondering, Because I think that concession at Joe Machado Field is, I don't know, it seems like it's pretty reasonable, but we haven't had a lot of success with the last 3 vendors, or 2 or 3. So I'm wondering where the disconnect is, perhaps.
I think we've identified what we might think the disconnect is. I mean, we think somebody can make a go of it, but, you know, we're working on some things. So this next RFP, we're gonna try to target somebody there that's committed as a job rather than a side job.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's gonna be our focus.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, great. Council, what's your pleasure with those 4 items?
I'll move to approve items 1 through 4 for consent.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, call for the vote.
Councilmember De La Rosa,
Aye.
Councilmember Lavelle,
Aye.
Councilmember Schickling,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ponce,
Aye.
Mayor Marshall.
Aye.
All ayes.
Okay, item number 5 is only item of general business. It's going to be Matt Baker step into the podium, and this is asking council to receive the report of the mid-year financial results for fiscal year 23-24 and authorize the proposed budget amendments as outlined in Exhibit A.
I'll be right back. Good evening, council. The presentation tonight is to go over the fiscal year 23-24 mid-year budget results, as well as outline the requested amendments and the rationale and reasons for those. So this slide kind of is a quick overview, so if you don't want to get into the weeds, this is kind of where we're at. Operating revenues right now are on track to exceed budget estimates. Again, that's more so in the general fund than the harbor, but we'll go over kind of the specifics of where we're at. But both funds, the major funds, are on track or slightly ahead of where we had estimated they would be. We do have a number of requested amendments. The first one on the list was actually presented to council back in September, but we never included the budget amendments with the increase to the employer contributions to the premium. So this one's a bit of a housekeeping item. Some of the other requests that will go into more detail is additional funding for fire department turnouts, a number of accounts that we have for storm damage due to the storms in the first half of the year already kind of met their budgeted amounts, and with the January storms and the February storms, we're expecting additional expenditures in those accounts. Some public works training, and we'll go into a little more detail as to what specifically we're looking to cover. Float storage, the waterfront trash contract, which is set to expire mid this fiscal year during the second half of the year. We do anticipate some contracted increases, and so we wanted to kind of get ahead of schedule on that one and include the amendment with mid-year, as well as fuel dock testing. In general, our capital outlays are significantly less than where we had budgeted for the full year. That's somewhat to be expected. We tend to have more of our activity in January, February, March to try to avoid the kind of peak visitor seasons. But there are some major capital projects that we had kind of planned earlier that might get shifted into the next fiscal year, and we'll show you what those look like when we get to those slides. So real quick, just as an overview of the general fund, kind of the table to the right has the first column listing out what the budgeted amounts were. So you can see TOT, we budgeted at $7 million. And as of December 31st, We had received 4.5 million, so 65% of where we had budgeted. Just kind of as a reminder, the percentage of budget doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be at 50%. July, August, September tends to be our busiest quarter, so we would expect to be more than 50% as of December 31st. But something else to keep in mind is the December visitor-driven revenues would not be reflected in these numbers because those wouldn't be due until the end of January. So we're really looking at 5 months worth of revenues, but at the same time, it's the busier of the months that are being captured there. Similarly, sales tax, we budgeted 1.4 million. We're at 41.4%, but there's a 2-month lag with sales tax. So those would be sales tax revenues through October reflected in that total. Property tax, the largest property tax payments we get are in January, so I'm really not surprised to see it that low. And if you go back and look at prior year mid-year updates, you'll also see similar low numbers in property tax as of December 31st. Again, similar to TOT ad tax, 62%, and then the other revenues, 77%. Then on the expenditure side, we're more or less in line with where we would expect to be. Law enforcement, again, that one's less than the 50%, and that's largely due to the fact that the December contract probably isn't, or the December invoice likely isn't reflected in that, because these are, again, payments as of December 31st. And the expenses slightly over 50% also shouldn't be too concerning, just because there are certain major expenditures that we pay at the beginning of the year. So for example, unfunded pension liability is a significant piece, particularly in the fire department for safety personnel. And so we pay that all up at front. So the fact that the fire department expenditures are at 52% doesn't necessarily cause me any concern. So you can see in the budget, looking at kind of our operating revenues and operating expenditures, we expected to see net operating revenues of $728,000. As of December 31st, we're at 1.375 million. While that's certainly positive, we tend to have more expenditures in the second half of the year, and our revenues tend not to be as large as I explained, the July, August, September being our busiest months. But that being said, we're still on track to exceed where we were anticipating to be in the budget. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but this is just comparing it to fiscal years 23 and 22 at mid-year. And the other difference is instead of comparing to the budget, it's comparing to the actual. So you can see last year at mid-year for TOT for hotels, we had collected 3.25 million, or 61.7% of actual. And so again, we're kind of right in line with where we're at in prior years. Revenues are down slightly, and I'll kind of go into that in more detail on TOT in particular. But again, nothing that kind of jumps out as far as where we had anticipated we would be in the budget. And then kind of on the expenditure side, the accounts that we are going to need amendments, I'll go into more detail as to what those amendments look like. So the next slide is a breakdown of our TOT, and this is based on collections as of January 16th. So I wanted to provide a slightly more updated figure for that, but I kept out all the December payments just to make it easier for comparison purposes. So you can see through the first 5 months of the year, we're about 300,000 ahead of where we would be if we only hit our budgeted number of 4.8 million for TOT for hotels. And so if that trend continues for the next 7 months of the year, we would finish up about 500,000 in TOT for hotels from where we budgeted. Again, we budgeted hotels at 4.8 million for the year. The last 2 fiscal years both exceeded that figure, but we tried to set a number we were confident that we would be able to hit. Similarly with vacation rentals, we're up 142,000 through January 16th from where we would expect to be if we were just going to hit our budgeted number. And if that trend were to continue, we'd finish the year up another 250,000. So again, if the second half of the year follows kind of a similar trend as the first half of the year, our TOT revenues would be about 7.8 million. That would be down from fiscal '23, where we had revenues of about 8.3 million, which would be down from where we were in '22 of 8.7 million. So while a downward trend is not something, that I would want to see, the one positive is if you think prior to COVID, we were receiving TOT revenues of around 5.5 million. And what we've really been careful doing in these budgets is not treating those 8.7 and 8.3 million years as kind of the expectation. And so treating those more as like a one-off or a one-time revenue has allowed us to really build our reserves. And so even though we are kind of trending downward slightly, it's still well above kind of our pre-COVID levels. And we haven't been reliant on those kind of record-setting years just to break even in our budgets. So that's kind of part of the reason why we did set the estimates where we did, is we wanted to make sure that we didn't need, those great years of 22 and 23 to necessarily be the norm just to break even. So this is breaking down kind of the general fund operating expenditures by department. So you can see the first three columns are salaries and benefits. The middle are maintenance and operations. So those are any things from supplies to utilities, rent, things of those nature. And then the third set of columns is the contract services. So you can see law enforcement, everything's kind of grouped with the contract services. And again, it's less than the 50%, because we likely don't have December's payment reflected in there. And if you notice, the numbers are gonna be slightly different from the ones on the other side. The reason for that is I didn't include internal services in here. And we'll go into the kind of the underlying numbers that make up those, but just to kind of get it fit on one page and a little easier to read, I opted to leave those out. You can see in fire department, labor is kind of the big driver of their budget. And at the mid-year, they're at 53.3%. Again, not all that concerned. Overtime's the one that I have to keep an eye on in that, but they're kind of right on where we had budgeted them to be in that account. And they're a bit higher than the 50% again because of the unfunded liability where we pay at the beginning of the year. I did highlight the maintenance and operations in the fire department just to remind council that one of the requested amendments was for turnouts or additional funding for turnouts for the fire department. In the prior year, we included $20,000 in the budget for these turnouts. However, we didn't actually spend the funds until the current year, but I didn't roll over any of the unspent funds because they were an operating account. And so what the chief's looking to do is essentially replace all the turnouts with the requested amendment. It would replace kind of a full set of turnouts. So all the full-timers would have new turnout gear, and it would also leave a little additional funding for cleaning of the existing ones, because what they do is the reserves then tend to use the older but still good and functioning gear. So we wanted to include some money for cleaning in there as well. You can see Public Works, the one to keep an eye on in Public Works is the maintenance and operations, and we have a number of requests that fall into that category that we'll go into in the next slide. Again, planning, recreation, nothing really stood out or that I felt needed to be raised in this meeting. So kind of looking at the Public Works budget in more detail, the ones I've highlighted in yellow, as you can see, the budget amount for special department expense was $6,000, and the year-to-date number is $17,000. In discussions with Bob and the Public Works team, we think there's some expenses here miscoded, and that's why the actuals over the budget. I haven't had the opportunity to go back and recode them to where we think the expenditures should be. But once we do that, that should correct the overage. There's some accounts that have minimal activity that we think something was miscoded. But the ones highlighted in red are two of the requested budget amendments. So training and travel and Public Works. This year to date, they were able to send both maintenance superintendents to a Public Works conference, as well as a number of their employees got crane certified and recertified. Those costs were more than kind of what was anticipated when we were developing the budget. One of the challenges with at least building out the training budget is, since we haven't had it for a few years, it was kind of guessing when we were coming up with the estimates of what it would cost to get the trainings. There's some additional trainings they're looking to do in the second half of the year. So part of the amendment is to make up for the overage, and the other part of the amendment is to provide some additional trainings. I think Jackie has plans to bring on some trainers on site for some training that we don't have to ship people over town to attend. I'm sure Jackie or Bob or Jamie could speak in more detail on what that would look like, but I believe it's heavy equipment related training. And lastly on there is storm damage. You can see we budgeted $50,000, and as of December 31st, it spent $49,000. 44,000 of that was just debris removal along the K-rails on Pebbly Beach Road. So as you can see, debris removal, it takes a full crew and a lot of heavy equipment to move that. In prior years, we had been spending about $50,000, but we had major storm activity in the first half of the year, which was somewhat rare. And then obviously the storms we've had here in January and February. And so we are requesting an amendment of $125,000 in storm damage in the general fund. What that would cover is the existing holes that are on Pebbly Beach Road. We've already started the process, I understand, of filling those in, but it would complete those projects, as well as provide some additional funding for new K-rails after some of them get damaged, with the storm, the rock slides and all that. And then it would also include a further $50,000 in the event there's additional storm damage in the second half of the year. And so that's how we get up to that $125,000 figure.
I have a question on that. Are we working with the county so far to try to get reimbursements for that?
We are. We've already had those meetings.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
That's a good point. Anytime we do have these storm damages, we do reach out to Cal OES, and Aliana and is right now working with them on funding for the January storm, and I'm sure we'll be working with them again on the February storms. But again, the numbers I put are kind of irrespective of whether or not we get that funding, just so we have the ability to kind of respond.
And,
Side question.
and Aliana introduced me to a lady that comes over from FEMA. And like every 2 weeks or something, she comes and is checking us out and stuff. So that was interesting to know.
Do we need to do like another local emergency, or is there like a certain date that it applies to for the last one we did?
Well, we specifically did it for the one that we have on the books is for the January 7th, 11th, and 11th storms. And in fact, we had a storm stakeholder meeting for this weekend last Friday, and then we had the meeting with Cal OES in between for the prior storm. So we'll look at that, but I think it's going to be ongoing. Bob's always on top of that. They track their time from day one on these storms, so we have that all set and all the paperwork in place. So if we have to go that route, we're ready.
Just a question for next year's budget on that as well. Should we be also budgeting up to 100,000 or maybe 125 for future years?
That's something we should probably look at.
Yeah.
In full disclosure, that's an account I probably, I'm a little too conservative on, and, we need to, so we don't have to come back at mid-year for this.
Yeah.
So unless there's more questions in the general fund, moving on to the harbor fund. Harbor fund, cross-channel revenues, we budgeted, and this was I've split out wharfage between the portion dedicated to operations and the portion dedicated to capital. But that gain and draw and reserves on the bottom is the funding that's left available to fund capital after all of the labor, maintenance, operating expenses, contract services have been covered. Again, on the revenue side, revenues are on track to meet budget estimates. They're slightly ahead of schedule of where we'd expect to be, and that's largely, again, due to the cruise ships, and I'll go into that in more detail on a future slide. But in general, the revenues are looking strong in the harbor, not the 6 figures ahead of schedule that we're seeing with the general fund, but the harbor's still looking good as far as the revenue side. Particularly in the other revenues, and again, this is one where I tend to budget low because it's really impossible for me to know going in, but that includes the transfer fees for mooring sales, and so this year I did increase it from 100 to 150,000, but we've already surpassed 150,000 as of December 31st. The lowest year since I've been here, we did 70,000 in transfer sales. And the highest year we've done 350, and it's really dependent on how much movement there is in the moorings, and there's not a great way for me to know that during the budget prep season, so I tend to go low on that number, and so that's why you see the other harbor revenues already at mid-year, kind of ahead of where we had budgeted. Then again, on the admin or on the operations side, nothing really stands out with an exception of a few accounts that I'll go over in more detail. On admin, you can see 57% is a bit higher than others, but that's really driven because insurance, we have some additional harbor insurance in there, and we pay that at the beginning of the year. And so that's why that one's kind of a little more than 50% compared to the others. And the fuel dock we'll get into as well. So again, not to dwell on this slide too long, but this is just in case people want to compare where we were at this point last year. So you can see with cross-channel wharfage, we are below where we were at this time the last 2 fiscal years. A lot of that's driven, and I'll show it in a future slide, by August. So we lost a whole weekend of, or really a weekend plus, due to the hurricane in August, and that's driving a lot of that decrease, as the other months have been generally at or slightly ahead of where we were at in the prior fiscal year. And I think there's also reason to be optimistic. During the second half of the year, we had, it's hard to say this after we got 4 inches of rain, but we had some unseasonably wet and cold spring last year, and so while the rain's good, I'm optimistic we'll have a warmer, sunnier spring than what we did last year. So moving on to the next slide, cross-channel wharfage. You can see that July was ahead of where we needed it to be to hit our budget target, but August is really what's driving down the cross-channel wharfage revenues compared to where we had budgeted. And if that trend were to continue, you can see we would miss our budget target by just under 30,000 in the harbor. I think there's reason to think that the second half of the year we'll do better than that. But again, if we were just to kind of meet the same trend where we've been, which is about 99% of where we were at in the prior year, we should at least come close to hitting that budget target. Really where we're seeing gains is in the cruise ship side. So last year in the budget, when I come up with the cruise ship revenue estimate, I look at what ships are scheduled, their capacity or occupancy, and then I make assumption on what their occupancy rates are going to be. I think I had assumed 90% when I developed the budget, and each month ship occupancy rates have been reported above 100%. Again, you can get above 100% because it assumes 2 passengers per cabin, and if you have 3 in a cabin, that's how you get over that 100% number. And because of that, if that trend were to continue, we would be up in cruise ship wharfage by about 300,000. So that covers kind of the shortage we're looking at potentially in cross-channel wharfage. The positive is the harbor, where we're really seeing the double-digit revenue growth, is cruise ships. The flip side to that is it does make us more dependent on that cruise ship as a revenue source to fund the harbor.
And does that subtract out the Prop H money?
No, this is just the city's collection.
Okay, yeah.
So I didn't include any of the
okay.
Prop H or Measure H. So again, on the Harbor Public Works, I highlighted this one because we do have a budget amendment requesting increasing the waterfront trash contract by $15,000. That's for anticipated contract increases as that contract gets renewed. There might be some other savings that go with that contract, but just to provide us with some ability to negotiate, I thought I'd get ahead of it, include the amendment in. Again, that contract has been kind of flat for the last 3 or 5 years, and so we do expect there to be some increase in that contract cost.
And we're not going to be going out to bid on that? That's going to be an automatic? Or?
We did go out to bid, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the accounts I'm going to focus on kind of fall in the harbor under the maintenance and operation. So the next slide is just going to kind of detail out the various maintenance and operation expenses. So you can see, just to touch on it real quick, in admin, why it's at 80% is 90,000 of that 134 budgeted is insurance, and if we pay it at the beginning of the year, that's why we're well over the 50% mark at mid-year. So the accounts that we're requesting budget amendments for, one of them is for fuel dock permit and testing. So we had an inspection last year that found a faulty sensor, I believe, in one of our fuel docks. And so while we do lease out the operations, there are still certain expenditures we're responsible for, considering it's our fuel tank. And so those costs were that $9,388. We still have some additional testing this year, and so that's why I requested an amendment to cover that that sensor replacement cost. For the most part, though, I try to get the fuel dock-related expenditures just into other harbor expenditure accounts, whether that's utilities or whatnot, and really try to isolate the expenditures there to the ones that are truly fuel dock and not the harbor just happens to be at the fuel dock, if that makes sense. Storm damage, you can see we had budgeted $25,000 and we've spent $24,000 as of December 31st. 22 of that $24,000 was dealing with a sinkhole that issue we had on, I believe, South Beach. So you can see one sinkhole, 22,000, kind of eats the whole budget. In prior years, we had only been spending about 25,000, and so that's why we'd kind of budgeted that amount. But it doesn't, provide a lot of wiggle room if issues do occur. And so I believe we requested 30,000 as an amendment. What that's going to cover is repairs that are needed to the steps at the Lover's Cove, as well as 15,000 in additional if something should arise during the second half of the year. And the last one, and it's kind of hidden on the bottom, is float storage. We had budgeted 6,000, and as of mid-year, we had spent a little over 6,000. That was really an oversight when we were developing the budget. There were some float storage costs that we just didn't consider when we were coming up with that $6,000 figure. And so that's why we're requesting an additional 8,000, I believe, to cover that.
Is that mainland storage or local storage?
I believe that's local. So sewer, saltwater, solid waste. Again, if you look at from a dollar perspective, it's really the contract services that drive these, and all three of them are below that 50% number. And the reason they're below that is likely the December contract costs haven't been included in those numbers. But nothing really to report on from sewer, saltwater, solid waste as part of the mid-year review. The other accounts look like they should be in line with where we had them budgeted. So then the internal service funds, so this kind of breaks up into three categories: general administration, insurance, and vehicle maintenance. Nothing really to report on vehicle maintenance or insurance at this time. But on the general administration, I do want to call out a couple of accounts, and I'll do that in the next slide. So again, I highlighted the special department expense in green, and that's just to give you an example of an account where we were over budget, but we were able to do an adjustment where we had savings in another account to cover that. So as attached, the second attachment as part of the staff report kind of goes over some of the accounts that were identified as being over budget, but where we can find savings in other accounts to cover that. And so that's why I just wanted to highlight that one in green, just to show what I mean with the budget adjustment. And then the requested amendment relates to contract services. So that account 5005 includes several different contracts. So typically it includes Townsend for 60,000, HDL Tax Consulting, so that's both our sales and property tax consultant, as well as we had factored in Xylo International for 30,000 in the budget. Xylo performed the community income survey for us. So we had budgeted 30,000 for it. When we went out to award the contract, it was for a not to exceed of 35. We spent 35. And so 5,000 of the requested is really to cover that difference. And then we also had some costs for Koff and Associates that likely was an oversight in my part. That was for the recruiting of the Public Works Director position. So that's not only the consultant's fee, but also the travel costs to bring out the various candidates that we brought to the island. And so we don't expect any additional funding or additional expenditures for that, but I hadn't factored that in when preparing the contract services budget. And lastly, real quick on capital projects. Just wanted to highlight, these are the general fund capital projects, and this is a trend you'll see. At the bottom is, we had 9 million planned spend in the current year. A lot of that driven by Five Corners, as well as Pebbly Beach Road. We've only spent $327,000 through December 31st. The one I wanted to highlight, though, was Joe Machado Field loan repayment. That was the last debt repayment for JMF. And so now the process is to start setting money aside for when we need to refurbish that field, because at some point we will need to rehab it. Not in the next couple of years, hopefully, but just to keep that in mind. So the next one is for the Harbor Fund capital projects. There's 2 I've highlighted, but we can go through the full list. Again, Small Phase 2 is really the big driver, but you can see we've spent $25,000 so far year to date on that project compared to the $8.3 million in the budget. Similarly, in the Grain Pier, we had $965,000 budgeted. We've spent $40,000 on some planning and permitting type services. The big one, or the ones I want to call out, is float rehabilitations, float 4 and 4A. The January meeting, council awarded or authorized staff to enter into negotiations to award a contract to not to exceed $97,000. We had budgeted $80,000, and that number is kind of derived from what we spent on float 5 last year. Float 4 is larger, and so we didn't, we kind of did a back of the napkin math and coming up with the $80,000, and so we are going to be requesting an amendment for $17,312 to cover that additional cost for the float 4 rehab. And then I've highlighted the underground fuel tank. I don't have a number right now, but I just wanted to bring it to council's attention that there have been some required work order changes that likely will lead to budget adjustments. Bob can probably speak to them in more detail and better than I can. So we'll likely be coming back at a future meeting, likely soon, to go over what those are and what that new number would be. Again, Bob's here, so if there's questions on what those are, you can speak to it. I just wanted to highlight it, saying we didn't request an amendment as part of mid-year, but once we have a better estimate of what those look like, we will likely be coming back for that. And lastly, in the other fund capital projects, we have 3 that I wanted to highlight, but just in general, you can see most of the accounts, we haven't had a ton of activity year to date. I know there's some major spend planned in the sewer fund, but year to date through December, you can see most of them haven't had that much activity. The ones I'm highlighting are Avalon Transit. And so as you saw those GEM vehicles out there, we purchased the majority of them last year through a grant we had, but the remainder, 10%. So we put 90% down while we held them, and that was covered through a grant. But the remainder amount the city has to cover, and I didn't factor that into the budget this year. So we are requesting an amendment to cover that. And then in general administration, the City Hall remodel was in our 10-year CIP plan, but it wasn't in there until FY26. So we have the ability internally to move projects within the CIP plan under a certain dollar amount within a year. But because we had that planned out for 26 instead of the current year 24, we are requesting an amendment to cover those construction costs. And then lastly, and this is similar to the issue with the turnouts, is last year around this time we adopted an amendment increasing our vehicle maintenance, vehicle replacement budget by $125,000 for the purchase of the skid steer. We weren't able to purchase the skid steer until August or September of this year, but I didn't factor that in when I developed the budget. I kind of expected that those funds would have been spent, and so I didn't factor the $125,000. We haven't spent the full amount, so we could make do and wait till next year, but I know Public Works is looking at purchasing some additional trucks to replace some of the older vehicles in our fleet. So if we could always wait till next year, particularly on that one, but that's why we're requesting the amendment for vehicle maintenance. And again, Bob can probably speak to the condition and all that better than I could. But. So that really is the presentation. So to sum it up, revenues are on track. Some of the budget amendments are things kind of we missed in the budget process, and so as we're building out the budget for next year, you know, those are accounts we'll look at to make sure next year I don't have to come with the same, you know, requests as I am this year. Some of them are hard to foresee as well, but that's kind of the mid-year budget update, unless there's any.
So if you totaled all of those amendments up, what does that total to? Approximately.
I don't have it.
You don't have
I know
that number off the top of your head?
I don't have it off the top of my head. I would say in the general fund, it's probably less than 200,000. You know, it's going to vary across the funds. In the harbor fund, it's probably less than 75, 80,000.
Yeah, I mean,
so I would expect that our revenues, you know, the surplus in revenues over budget would cover the requested amendments.
Oh, sure. I mean, it really isn't that much. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, a $30-40 million budget, so
Yeah.
sometimes things get missed.
Well, once again, I think you've done an excellent job. What questions do we have of our finance director? Or of Bob, or of the harbor? We're good.
Yeah, I don't think I have many. The only one I was going to point out, and I know you guys are probably already looking at the process for it, but just ensuring that any grant match requirements get a budget allocation when the grant is received so that we don't miss them later.
All right.
Yeah. But otherwise, great. I mean, yeah.
And then just
Good
real
capturing.
quick, to touch on the schedule for next year's budget, because
Yeah.
we're fully into budget season now. We are looking to present at the second meeting of April, just another revenue update of kind of where we're at year to date, as well as some kind of preliminary estimates for revenues for next year. I might try to also include some discussion of our unfunded pension liability, so that should be an exciting meeting.
Yeah.
So mark your calendars. The first meeting of May is when we're going to hopefully go over the kind of draft of the operating budget. So we're going to take the approach like we've done the last couple of years, where we're going to be sharing with you as we're building the budget. So things might change from the meetings in May, but that way we can get your input and incorporate your input, you know, as we're building the budget. So the first meeting in May, we'll be looking at the operating budgets, and so that would include things like labor, you know, any programming type expenses, utilities, rent, the boring stuff, contract services. So that would be the first meeting in May. The second meeting in May, we'd be looking at a more in-depth discussion of CIP, and then have a draft of the budget to share the first meeting of June, and then bringing hopefully a final version of the budget that second meeting of June for adoption. And if needed, we can schedule special meetings or study sessions if there's a desire from council, really any time in May or June.
Great. All right, no questions? Matt, thank you, once again.
I did want to ask, since the whole storm damage is on there and we've discussed a couple times the hillside erosion control, would it be a good idea to do that now? To one, look to see if it's in the budget and or if it's something that could fall under the reimbursement from the county?
I'm sorry, which project?
The netting erosion for the hillsides. I know they're getting a lot of damage out there now.
Yeah, we have Crescent Hillside, for example, is part of the capital improvement project, and also submitted that through FEMA seeking reimbursement. So part of that is already in there. I know that we have somewhere a proposal for the netting that we could dig back out.
And I think that's a good point to bring up. I don't know if we do have the Crescent Hillside, but kind of netting specific, I don't think we have anything right now in our 10-year CIP, but those are the things we should be trying to capture, even if we don't have funding in the current year. That's way it stays on staff's radar when grant opportunities come up. And so I'm working with Jackie on the new CIP budget, and we'll make sure to include that in there.
Thank you.
Well, and I guess the question is, and this is to Bob, is that netting the real way to go?
That's a good question.
Yeah, we actually have a plan developed in 2015 for that, and we had a cost estimate. It is expensive, but you can do it in phases too. So, you know, right next to the mole where you have a lot of activity,
Right.
that had a higher risk, and then you get in that straight stretch, and you could do that in a couple different pieces, you know. And that'd be something, hopefully we can go out and get some grants to help us with that, or an earmark.
Yeah.
But yeah, that, you know, it's gonna extend way up, and then it's gonna be pinned, and then at the bottom, it's gonna have the relief, so it can go down into the
right.
K-rail system.
Okay,
So the rocks don't bounce and go into the
Right,
road. I think that's
right.
what we're trying to achieve.
right, okay.
So yeah, and some of that netting, you see it all over, you know, Caltrans puts it on the hillsides throughout California.
Yeah, okay, I wasn't sure that that's
Okay,
the way
so
you wanted to
yeah,
go.
I think
so-
we're a little bit further along, at least with some preliminary planning.
Right.
Okay.
Than I think everybody thinks.
Okay.
So we bring that back out, make sure that we have a capital detail page, that's what Matt's talking about.
Right.
Make sure that we have, and that should be for all our capital projects, anything that we have a vision for the next 10 years.
Right,
We should have that in our capital improvement program so that we can see, and we always can roll that to the very end of the program. And then it's at least ready to go and discuss whenever we want to bring it back, okay?
okay. And Scott, you showed your.
Yes, we actually had a plan for the netting, and we actually went to the Coastal Commission and got it approved. We even had an agreement with the island company for that, and we were gonna use our redevelopment funds, and then the state took them all away. So we do have those plans, we could bring them out, and then we'd have to resubmit them to the Coastal Commission. But that has been on our radar for a long time. We just did lose the money. The state took it away.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm
But-
just wondering if now would be a good time, because I know the rain isn't gonna stop anytime soon, and, you know, it's a state thing as well, so if you can kind of just use this as an opportunity to fix that issue now.
Sure. No, I think it's a good idea. I mean, we'll make sure we get that on there.
Okay, thank you, guys.
and I have one other question. Thinking about the Front Street Beach, and where are we on all of that? You know, I know that, you know, people keep saying, oh, we have to just put those girders back up, because those worked, and the girders that were underneath the pier that used to be part of, where is all of that? Because the erosion and all that's still happening.
So,
Yeah, if you want to hit the highlights, I mean,
okay, so we just are, again, this is the third round, or third attempt at going for grant funds with DBW, so the Department of Boating and Waterways, so we just submitted a grant for that. And so we weren't successful before, and so one thing about the DBW grants, they're a line item in the budget, and so when the state budget gets a little skinny, then that whole program goes away, and that, I think that's possibly gonna happen again, but we attempt it every time.
Yeah.
We do have a current cost estimate. We do have, with ESGR on-call consulting firm, we have at least where we're trying to move forward with getting the permitting, get the preliminary plan so that we've got a solid set of plans so that we can get to the point where it's ready to go out to construction.
Right.
That's a lot more marketable in a grant when we get there. And if we're not successful with a grant and the community wants to have, you know, what is it? And can we fund it even with our harbor capital fund
Right.
to be able to do that? So what that would entail would be to put the groin back in, some of the groins that were historically there, but about a length of about 70 feet. Maybe import the sand and not dredge it from the harbor, because we were
Okay.
costing that out, and then, you know, versus the impact environmentally. So put the sand back there, and then repair that section of seawall. The top needs to be repaired there,
Right.
and because it's going to have sand on both sides of it, you're only going to have about 3 foot of exposure on that. So it's really not a retaining wall anymore. It's really that defining line of the beach park, the beach,
Park,
upper
yeah.
beach, and
Yeah.
the tidal zone.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 elements that we're
Okay.
putting forward in those grant applications.
Because it basically is a repair, right? Don't we get a little leniency when it's a repair versus something brand new?
It's a repair,
Yeah.
and it seems like Coastal Commission's good with putting beach sand in. They're doing it all up and down the mainland. They're not real good with putting rock or groins in, but we're a very unique situation. We're not the mainland where you have that literal flow of the sand.
Right.
So we have a very unique situation. They're very much positive, trying to put recreational access.
Okay.
And I mean, that's what South Beach is, right? You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of Bob or Matt? Matt, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Well, council?
I make a motion to receive the report of the mid-year financial results for fiscal year 23-24 and to authorize the proposed budget amendments as outlined in Exhibit A to this report.
I'll second.
Call for the vote.
Councilmember De La Rosa?
Aye.
Councilmember Lavelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Schickling?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ponce?
Aye.
Mayor Marshall?
Aye.
All ayes.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Okay,